All right. Okay. Hey, everyone. I think we're live now. So I'm here with Don Roff. He is a writer, screenwriter, writer of many different types of things, novels, graphic novels too, or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Zombies was a graphic novel.
So basically, he writes everything, everything possible, which is exactly why I invited you to come talk to us today, Don. I thought it would be really great if you could kind of give us a rundown of how you get so much done. I mean, honestly, that's really what I'm most curious about is just how you do all the writing that you do.
Right.
So if we can start with just a quick like overview of your background, how you became a writer and how you got to, through the projects that you've written and what you're writing today.
Absolutely. Really, yeah, I started writing probably like 14 years old. Me and my friends used to make little movies like, like kind of, VHS movies and Super 8 movies. And most of those were just kind of written in the camera. We would just get a movie camera and shoot over the weekend. And then I was like, hey, this might be better if I start writing actual scripts. So that kind of got the script bug in me. And at the time there was no internet, of course, so I used to order scripts from like Script City and things like that. And then that really got the script bug going. And that was mid 80s or so. And I've written scripts off and on since then. I didn't really start.
You started with scripts, not with novels.
I did. Yeah, I've written probably, I don't know, 26, 28 feature scripts. Some of, placed in contests, and like the Nickel Fellowship, I did pretty well. One of those didn't place, but, got really high up there one time with a script. And I did that for quite a while. And then about 2006, I kind of switched over to novels because my first book was published. It was called Scary Stories, not the Scary Stories book, but a Scary Stories book. It was for Scholastic. And I kind of got the prose writing bug in me. For a while, I was like, how would you write a novel? It's like I have friends who are novelists, and that just, to me, seemed like a completely different animal. And it was like they're so long, and it's like but then once I started writing, I was like, wow, I can be everything here. I can be my director, I can be the editor, I can be the I can do everything here. I'm not waiting for somebody to collaborate with me. I'm basically just collaborating with a reader. And that really kind of took me.
That's cool.
So yeah, so as I wrote probably 15 books for Scholastic. I lose count. I don't know, 15, 17, something like that, for Scholastic. And then I started writing novels. I wrote my first novel in 2011. It hasn't been published yet. I've written like probably 5 novels that nobody will ever see. So yeah. And I also worked as a book editor too for juvenile fiction. And that's kind of what also helped me get kind of in the publishing world as well.
Got it. And, so you were doing that and then decided to try your hand at writing.
Exactly. And I tell you, if you want to learn to be a better writer, be an editor first, because let me tell you, I've had to fix a lot of manuscripts, and that really ups your game. So
yeah, I bet actually that teaches you a lot about probably recognizing, kind
absolutely,
of the most common things that people do that you can avoid right away.
Absolutely. And as far as like book writing, I've probably optioned 3 or 4 books that I've written that they've been optioned for films, and I came close to optioning one script. Actually, that was Snowblind. A company wanted to option it a few years ago, and the money they kind of offered, as far as like what the eventual payoff of the script would be, was so minimal. I was like, that's just like basically just giving my script away. And I was like, this is kind of too special of an idea. And that's why I decided to novelize it. And immediately right out of the gate, it got optioned from a bigger company, and now it's in production, and hopefully we start shooting this year. But yeah, it's kind of strange. Like, I've written so many scripts, but like it seems like producers want IP. They want the novels, and like every novel I've written, even I've got one that I wrote actually 4 years ago, and I just started showing it around. and it's, you know, it's gotten great coverage. There's already talk they want to do a TV series of it. It's already kind of just starting to make the rounds.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, there's something. I feel like I can kind of express myself a little bit better with novels and scripts. That said, I'm going to write one of my first spec scripts this year. I have an idea for it. It definitely feels like a movie idea more than a novel idea. So I definitely want to, you know, I still love the screenwriting process, and it was my first love. So, and I feel like the screenwriting process made me a better novelist too, because you're more to the point as a screenwriter, whereas as a novelist, you can go on for pages and pages of, you know, internal monologues and things. And I feel like screenwriting is a really good discipline for you know, for words and pages, you know.
Yeah, well, screenwriting teaches you to only use what you need, right?
Exactly.
And so then when you go to novel form, then you can embellish it and make it more impactful. But it's like you're still doing pretty close to that spine.
Yeah, so, exactly. And it was a different set of tools too, because, you know, when you write a screenplay, you're basically only kind of reporting what you see and what you hear. You don't get so much of the internal, you know, without resorting to something like, you know, voiceover, things like that. So that was a whole different animal of like getting more internally into the characters. So that took me a few different books, and I'd have editors saying, well, all you're doing is just saying this happens, this happens, this happens. You know, what's this character thinking? What are they going through? You know, use your novel, you know, use the tools a novel has. So once you get into that, then it's almost kind of hard to go back to scripts, because then you're like, how do I? Because you have to be really crafty with scripts. It's like, how do I get that information out? You know. So, case in point, a novel that I did write. I was just kind of toying with writing it as a pilot script, just to kind of show the producers, like, because this character I'm writing, she has a very unique viewpoint and the way she sees the world, and it's like, how would you deliver that visually? So I was just kind of writing a script just to show how one would do that, you know. So it's kind of interesting to dissect your own work again like that.
Yeah.
Like, how do I externalize this? So it's kind of an interesting exercise to do that.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good exercise to continue to like challenge yourself to see your own work in different ways. I think you uncover more layers, and you sort of learn it better.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you though, did you adapt your novel, Snowblind?
No, I didn't. Actually, Snowblind did, like I said, did start as a script first, and then I novelized it. And then I found when I novelized it, I was like, oh, I don't have to worry about budget. I can do whatever crazy thing I want. And then I did do a few like scenes like that. No, actually, a friend of mine named Hank Woon, we had worked together at Microsoft, and we had, you know, kind of became friends, and because we were both, you know, really into screenwriting. And he had, you know, he's gone on and done quite a few movies. And anyway, he saw me, you know, kind of promoting Snowblind, and he was like, hey, I know a producer that would probably be really interested in this. And so he just showed it to the producer, and over the weekend, he's like, my slate is completely full, but I've got to have this book. You know, I mean, so like Monday, he signed it, you know, and it was really, you know, the agreement that like I'd already told what I said, everything I needed to say. So, and, you know, I'd love to see I kind of love the collaborative process, and I really wanted to see what Hank would bring to it, because he was such a good writer. So I was like, I'd love to, you know, I'm just going to hang out here and let you do your thing, Hank. And, you know, I definitely had, it was great because it's horror, and because it's, you know, it takes place so much in the military world that I kind of had to be a consultant on it. So I was still in that process. We had a lot of dialogue. He asked me a lot of questions, and that's one thing I love about the film process. You do get that with an editor when you're writing manuscripts, but that collaborative process is the best. Yeah. If you find somebody you can work with, it's like, it's gold. I mean, it's just gold. Yeah. So Hank and I worked really well together that way. So
you were the subject matter expert on set then? Did you get to do that, or just while he was writing the script?
While he was writing the script, but, you know, the director and I have been talking, and so hopefully that'll go, you know, beyond that. Because, you know, it's a world that none of the filmmakers really understand. Yeah. So
what's your background in the military?
I joined the. I did, basic training. I went to airborne school. This was '89, and then I went to the Ranger Indoctrination Program and became a U.S. Army Ranger.
Wow.
1989. Yeah, and
That's amazing.
yeah. So
you have
that
you have all that experience to draw on in your writing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought, and I always kind of wanted to, that's kind of where Snowblind came from. I was like, I kind of want to write about these experiences, but, so I kind of had this ghost story idea. And then I was like, I had a couple of instances that Snowblind was based off of. And I was like, what if I put them together? And then I was like, wow, it became this whole other thing. And so I definitely want to write some more about, military and working with elite forces, but I don't, in some context, I don't know what that'll be, but I'm not quite done with that yet. So, well,
it's great that you could use that experience and sort of in the genre, because I know you're a big horror fan and you know like everything about everything in the horror genre. So it's nice that you could like combine them.
Yeah, I still feel like a student. There's still so much to learn, but it's fun to like take two different genres like that, like the horror genre and the military genre, and kind of put them together. Just putting two different genres together and kind of seeing what happens, can really lead to a whole new kind of way of telling stories. So
yeah, okay. So I really want to get to your sort of your writing process, organizational productivity stuff. So
absolutely.
I thought we'd start maybe big picture. Do you have like a number of projects you want to produce each year? How do you decide what you're going to tackle?
Oh yeah. Typically for this year I have like four novels I want to finish, but those are shorter novels. Mm-hmm. Probably more like novellas, and at least once, that script I want to write, not to mention my monthly contribution to Save the Cat, however long that'll go, hopefully forever, but they might like, oh, we're done. But so I want to, that monthly contribution. Plus I'm always usually have a producer on the phone like, hey, Netflix is interested in this concept. You want to develop it? Like I'm developing a Netflix concept right now. So so those always kind of pop up. And the way I work with it is sort of what I did when I was a book editor, or I also was a journalist. I used to do a lot of press releases and things like that. It's just really, what's due first, and that's what takes the time. Like for example, this Netflix thing we want to get out soon. So of course that's number one, and number two, of course, is then my beat sheet for my next Save the Cat installation, and that's due, that'll be due at the end of the month for the last Friday of the month. And I have a novel I'm just aching to get back to. I'm like at the last third, and of course that's going to take a little bit of a back seat because I don't have a publisher waiting for that yet. So it's still a spec thing. So that's going to take, even though I want to get onto my novel, it's like I've got these other obligations I have to fulfill. So, so sometimes I might work, say like 10 to noon on one project, I have a little app called Freedom, which kind of locks off the internet. And that's a whole nother challenge. It's just like turning off the internet because I'm such an internet junkie. But, I might work 10 to noon on one project, and then, take lunch, and then work a couple hours on another project, and then a couple hours on another project. And then if there's something still due, I might work, another couple hours at night. Just depends.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like you do like to sort of work on multiple projects in one day. Right. And you like to sort of give yourself a 2-hour block or so on a given
2 hours is pretty good. Yeah. More than that, and my concentration kind of wanes a little bit. So that's another thing is being a person with sort of ADHD, you kind of have to, your concentration varies. So, and you also tend to take on a lot more projects than you can handle, but you're always going to say, yes, I'll do it. This is exciting. So, so you have to really learn how to self-manage. And that's really, to me, more so the writing is the easy part. It's the self-managing, and to me is the most challenging thing ever. And one thing I kind of learned is writing sprints. I've kind of been doing those just for fun. Like I'll set the timer on freedom for like 30 minutes, and which is nice because then the timer pops off and says your session's now expired. Yeah. And so like just before this, I'm trying to finish up that Netflix thing, and I probably, banged out, 500,000 words on it just in that 30-minute block. The story's pretty much all set out. I kind of write what's called a beatment. I'm gonna coin that phrase, beatment. It's like I always start with a beat sheet. And a log line, and then the beat sheet. And then I don't like quite writing treatments because part of me still is a little bit of a pantser. So I still like to have that discovery, but I like to have, a little bit more. So I'll usually see the whole spine as a beat sheet, and then I'll add some scenes here and there, not like the typical 40 scenes you might have, but just scenes and ideas that I have. And it's like, oh, well, that's probably a dark night of the soul moment. And that's definitely a fun and game. So I'll kind of put them in there, but I still like that discovery process. And again, all that can change. Like at the end, like this current novel I'm working on, the whole, third act change. I'm like, that was an interesting direction to go with, but I think this is a lot more closer to the theme and what I'm trying to say. So I'll completely rework that third part, so.
Do you have a pace that you try to maintain when you're, I know all your projects are different, but like when you're writing a screenplay, do you give yourself 6 weeks to finish it, or? Oh
yeah. Screenplay, I found like screenplays are very exacting, and so I find like more than 5 pages a day, and I get really kind of tired out. So I'm like, whenever I tell a producer, I'm like 5 pages a day. That's it, and I don't even like working on weekends that much. So it's be like 5 pages a day. Working days, like weekends, I like to usually not write if I can. As far as and 5 pages a day, I think that comes out to about when you start writing novels, everything's word count, not page count. Like scripts, it's always page count. But I think about five pages equals about 1,000 to 1,500 words, and for novels, that's about like 1,500 words is a pretty good amount per day. If I tend to write more than that, like if I might bang out 3,000 words, I'll find the next day I'm really taxed. So I feel like that's a good, amount, about 1,500 words to 2,000 words at the most per day. Because you have to let that, your subconscious kind of, recycle. Even though if you have a beat sheet or whatever, your fully realized treatment, you still have to recycle and let your subconscious kind of work on those problems. I'm so curious how you, because I have worked on, maybe 2 or 3 projects at once, not even all, screenplays or novels. But it sounds like you have, because you have the beat sheets and the novel and treatments and, and everything. So how do you keep track of where you are in a given project and like get into your next work session, productively? Mostly just I just kind of highlight it in Word, just like a yellow spot. It's like, okay, that's where I stop. But no, usually I'm just juggling all that in the air, and I always keep a notebook with me, and I'm always taking little notes like, oh, this would be a great scene for this next part. Now, I mean, if I could just get away with doing one project and finishing it all the way through, that would be great, but that's not the way it ever works. Like I said, I do my monthly thing for Save the Cat, and I always have people calling me on the phone like, hey, let's write a pitch for this, or let's do this. And I'm like, yes, that sounds great. So it never works like that. I'm always like, Chase, I'm writing a novel, leave me alone, but that never works that way. So Well, and it sounds like the energy from other people and other projects sort of keeps you. It's intoxicating. I love just getting on the phone for a couple hours and just BSing on a potential project. Nothing might even come of it, but just talking about films and story, that to me is the best thing ever. And of course, it puts off writing too. So yeah, I love that collaborative process. So if you find, like I said, if you find somebody that you can work with well, it's gold. So it's productive procrastination. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so I know we have a bunch of questions that people wrote in for you. Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to try to cover those. I think we've already covered some. You mentioned that you are more of a pantser. I used to be a pantser, but
Okay.
I do outline more because I found it saves drafts, a lot of drafts. So I'm both, a little bit of both. I do outline, I do the beat sheet, the beatment, which is the beat sheet on steroids. But I do save room for creative interpretation. And like when I write a scene or a chapter, I don't really know where the scene's going. I know kind of what I want to happen, but I still like to let that unfold on itself. So I get that pantsing bit because I think there's some magic to that of having surprise. Because I feel like if you know what's going to happen in your story at every moment of the way, why write it? I mean, part of it's that discovery process. So it's a little bit of both. Yeah.
Okay, and when you, I'm curious, when you start with an idea before you get to the beatment, before you get there, what's your sort of development process from idea to that phase?
Okay, usually, and I find most of the time this is going to sound really kind of counterproductive, but usually when you get an idea, it's kind of best to forget it. You know what I'm saying? Because when you're writing, you get so many ideas, and most of them aren't that good anyway. But if I get an idea that I feel like is pretty strong, I just open a Word document and I just vomit on everything that I can think about it. What music I was listening to at the time, what could have possibly where I got that idea, because if I need to recreate that, I might be able to. Most of the time, I just vomit everything onto a thing, write a little thing, and put it off to the side. And it's kind of like trout, it's just like the strongest ones make it back up. Most of the time, those ideas get forgotten, but a few will keep, kind of bumping up next to me. And it's like, oh, and that's when I know that idea is pretty strong. So yeah, it's like and then when you go back to it, you're like, wow, look at all this information. It's like a little treasure trove. So I think that's a, really good, that's what works for me anyway.
And then you just sort of start organizing those ideas into what shape is this story going to have?
Right. But I think one of the best things to do is not to just, for me anyways, like I've gotten an idea for a novel and the next day I just started writing it, and that was probably the worst thing I ever have done in my life, because it's time wasted, and I end up with the novel I can't even use because it just doesn't work. So kind of like getting the idea, thinking about it, and then kind of sitting back and then, kind of taking pot shots at it and like, what about this? And what about this? And then writing all that down. And then, just kind of putting it aside and thinking about it. I think, a lot of writers have too much their mind on the end result rather than the process. And I think that messes a lot of writers up, just kind of enjoy the journey. I think it was Roald Dahl who said, it's like writing is like kind of walking every day, a little bit of the trail, walking up the side of a hill. And when you by the time you're done, you turn back around and you can kind of see the whole journey. But on the way there, you're just seeing little bits at a time. Well, that's, you should enjoy that nature walk. If you're sprinting the whole way, you're going to miss a lot of that great scenery and opportunities. So I think taking it slow and just enjoying the process is really, I think it's probably one of the best things for a writer to do. And allow your subconscious to, recharge every day, work a little bit, stop, and let it recharge, so.
Interesting. That's good advice. I like that. And you still manage to write 500 things a year. So
I know. Most of the time I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. When I look back, I'm like, oh, I guess I did do all those things. But most of the time I do feel like I'm just kind of spinning my wheels.
Yeah, so. But it's just you have daily progress though. So
right. And that's really what it is. It's pennies in a jar. It just doesn't seem like much at the time, but at the end the jar's filled with pennies. So
that's awesome.
So, yeah.
Okay, so what? Let's see. Some questions here. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to cover which ones we've already talked about. How do you handle? Because it sounds like you have a pretty good, established process for your kind of day-to-day stuff. What happens when something comes up? Do you find that you have to rearrange your schedule, or do you protect your writing hours at all costs? Or
I found it's best to try to write at the same time every day and kind of keep it a habit. That seems to work the best for me. Just like I said, try to write from 10 to noon every day. Definitely protect that as much as possible. So I find just making habits out of that kind of works best. But it depends on what's going on at the time. When I worked as a book editor, the only time I had to work, and I had a family, with a young child, the only time I could really get any work done was like 5 in the morning, before work. So I get up and get that 2 hours done, and then go to my job, and and then I'd go home, and it was family time, and then time to go to sleep, and then that was it. So it depends on whatever's happening at the time. It's like, and then you just make that. You protect that with your life,
Right.
that writing time. So, do
you have like some sort of ritual that gets you into writing every day, or?
Typically, usually when I wake up, I usually just try to read a little bit, because to me, I think that's the most important thing for a writer, is to read as much as possible from a wide variety, whether you're reading essays, short stories, nonfiction. Just reading other writers tends to really get me excited and to remember why I'm doing it in the first place. So I'll pick up usually I read a lot of short stories or poems or scripts or anything, whatever's laying around, I'll just grab it and read it. So that gets me going a little bit, and then I usually just, have coffee and then start the day, so.
It sounds lovely.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good routine.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. Most of the scripts you've written seem to be action, sort of high concept type thing.
Right. Yeah.
Is that strategic, or is that just what interests you?
When I first started writing, they were all pretty very, sort of dramatic genre, kind of dramatic pieces. That like the one that did really well at the Nickel was a very character-centered, very indie movie piece. And I find that no matter what I'm writing, it's still a character-centered piece, whether it's a ghost story or anything, because I tend to like character studies, which are very much a first-person kind of perspective of character. So, but over the years, I've been trying to make them. I don't want to say commercial, but I feel like, just doing other writing, when I used to write press releases, my boss would be like, why would people care about this? Ask yourself that. And when I start doing that with stories, why would people care about this particular story? And when you start asking yourself those kind of questions, then I guess, it does kind of become more, high concept, because, you're putting in stakes and things like that. So, if you can make it a little more universal, not just your experience, but, a universal experience, then I feel like it, then
you have it
connect
all.
with more people. Right.
Yeah. Well, since you write both, I'm curious, since you write both screenplays and novels, do you find that developing an idea into one or the other is different, or is it pretty much the same? Are you mistakes?
It's the same. I use a beatment for both. It's virtually the same. So absolutely.
You're going to get that to catch on, the beatment.
Exactly. Beatment. I want to coin that phrase, and I think it's a great tool too. It's the same for both. So absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So Chaco had a bunch of questions for you, so I'm going to run through them. But first, I'm going to start with, he noticed that eating ice cream is apparently the cure to writer's block. So what flavor, what flavor do you suggest?
That quote will follow me to my grave. That is always quoted on Twitter, I guess, well, at the time, I think I was, pistachio or rum raisin is probably my absolute favorite.
Nice.
But you can't always find that. So.
Right. Okay. How do you, or do you have any advice for dealing with notes and or rejections or setbacks on a project?
Oh, I get notes all the time. Just the other day, I was talking to my producer about this, potential book, and he was just like, I think I'm going to take this, and he didn't use the words gut, but he was like, I'm going to take this and turn it into this. And part of me was like, this is my baby, but then part of me was like, I understand that process, it's a totally different thing. You're putting it out there. So I usually, with notes, I take the notes, be like, oh, thanks for, and if I find the note useful, I'll use it. If I can't make it work, I just kind of ignore it and see if they notice. So, because sometimes people just say something to say something, but they don't always back it up. So
yeah. Do you think your experience as sort of on the other side of the process has made it easier for you to be the writer in the process?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that?
Do you think that being like on the editorial side has made it easier for you to be the writer in the process? Because you know what that
absolutely.
Is doing
absolutely.
well.
Absolutely, yes. And as an editor, I've tried to be sensitive to knowing that I'm a writer, to try to be sensitive to, writers, like, how can I put this so I don't sound like a complete dick, and how it can be understood. So with a way to kind of encourage the writer to, like, have you tried looking at it this way? Or have you, maybe asking it as a question more as a statement, like, could we do it? Could we try it this way and see what happens? I find that kind of works a little bit better as far as possibly, because you don't want to shut the writer down.
Right.
You really want to encourage them to expand and just think of things in a different way. And like for myself, it's just all about, did I consider every possibility, So I find if you just kind of ask a question like, did you try it with this? Or what if this could happen? What would happen to the character then? I feel like that's kind of the best way for feedback.
And I think not everyone is good at articulating their feedback in a way that's encouraging. But it seems like, having been in that position where you are working with, then as a writer, you understand what that person's going through and trying to get out of you, I think. So exactly.
It also comes as a point of where you are in your life and where you are in your career. I know as a younger writer, I definitely was a little bit more unsure of myself. So I had a lot more ego going in, and I was more like, you can't teach me anything, kind of thing. Where now I'm a lot more laid back, and, I'm older. So I'm not as kind of precious with what I do. So, and I do like that collaboration process, because I've shown work where I thought it was brilliant, and then, depending on who you're working with, they'll be like, hey, did you try this? Or I feel like, if you did this, and I was like, wow. And it opens up a complete thing you never thought of. So most of the time, even if the note is, kind of complete rubbish, in a way, it still makes you think about something. It's like, well, they keep mentioning that. So maybe there's something there. So I think it can, help you kind of revalue your work and everything. And it always usually in the end makes you stronger. So
I had a writer friend who used to say that when you're getting notes, you should be open to all of them, because it doesn't matter where the good idea comes from. You still get credit for it. Exactly.
That's true.
Just take everybody's good ideas when you can.
That's exactly right. If it's a bad idea, like, no, that was a producer's idea. It was a good. If they give you the good idea, no, it was mine.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we have some questions written in here today. People who are watching you. Any advice for first-time writers getting into the competition phase to find agents and managers? Any tips for writers who want to get representation?
Oh, yeah. I would say the contest thing really worked for me. Like, I started doing the nickel and stuff like that. And when my script was like really going up the ranks, I was getting all kinds of phone calls and stuff. And it wasn't really that marketable a script. And when they would ask me, what's the script about? And then I would tell them, they're like, oh, okay, so, but yeah, the contests I found were really good, just to kind of, first they kind of give you a deadline. You're like, oh, the nickel's coming up in, May 5th. I got to get this done. So early on, that really helps a lot. It helped me anyway. And it does get your name out there. I have, a really good friend of mine. That's how she got her manager, and now she's writing a movie right now for somebody, and she's worked with lots of, big name people. And it was through contests, because that's how they saw her writing, so.
I definitely think contests can get you attention. It just depends on, you have to be careful. There are a lot of contests now, I think. So
there are.
Pick and choose the ones that will actually, carry any weight, I guess.
There are a lot of money grab ones that just, that want to take advantage of writers. Like something like the nickel is definitely one that's, proven itself. There's a few really pretty reputable ones, and ones that a lot of producers pay attention to. There's also the blacklist. That my same friend, she got on the blacklist too, and that that got a script in development just because it hit the blacklist. So that's another way to do it. And it's kind of a way to compete with yourself in a way too.
Right.
So you always try to, one up yourself with every project you do. So.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of the best strategy, I think, with contests.
Yeah.
You use them to push yourself, but don't make that the entire strategy for getting your work out there,
Find contest of meaning. So it is hard to get work out there. It's there's no real sure way. And that said, I've like I said, I've been published many times by publishers, but even though I've made them a lot of money, they still turn down ideas all the time. So it doesn't mean you're in like Flynn either. So
do you think having, because now you've just written so many things now, do you think that helps you not feel precious about each individual thing? Has it gotten
Absolutely.
easier?
It does. I wouldn't say the writing process, it doesn't get any easier. Like every novel I approach, I almost feel like I have to relearn the process of writing again. It's like it's never the same thing ever. Yeah. Even though I still approach it with the beatment, it's still, I feel like I have to reinvent the process every time for myself. It's like I'm just, keep reinventing the wheel. I'm sorry, what was the question?
What were you talking about? Oh, just whether or not it gets easier.
Oh, if it doesn't get easier. Now, I think it doesn't get easier, but you tend to not make as many mistakes. You won't go down certain pitfalls and things that you might have done as a younger writer. Yeah. I don't know if it gets easier, but you make a lot less, I think, you don't make as many novice mistakes as you might have done before.
Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah, and again, reading as much as possible, because then you can see what other writers are doing and where they might have made mistakes, and that's worth a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Have you ever written anything that was based on real life? I mean, I know your novel incorporates some stuff.
Yeah, I wrote two biopics. They were just on spec. Nobody was waiting for them. I did one on Sam Cooke, who's one of my favorite singers. And I did one on Preston Sturges, who's one of my favorite filmmakers. Yeah, I read the book between flops, and I was like, why isn't this a movie? And so just for fun, I sort of, read everything I could on Preston Sturges and wrote a biopic on that. And same with Sam Cooke. And I found that both, especially with the Sam Cooke one, I was trying to be way too truthful, and it really mired me down. So you really have to streamline I kind of lost the spirit of what I was trying to say in the story by being too mired by what actually happened, too many facts. Yeah. So you really can only just kind of and too many scenes about what, following them from cradle to grave, where I find most biopics that are really good. I think one of my absolute favorites is Ed Wood by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. It's just, you kind of just follow, the most important moment in that person's time, the thing that made them who they are. Yeah. So it might just be a few months or a couple of years, but not their entire lifespan.
Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, that's what movies are, really. It's about defining moments about, in somebody's life. So,
exactly. Yeah. Rocky Balboa, the first Rocky movie, is about his defining moment. He's not a real person, but that was his defining moment. So
so you sort of have to find that in the true story and then shape your story around that.
Exactly. And then you just would follow okay, what scenes will strengthen this premise here, and just go with that. And you might have to compress characters, because when I was writing the Sam Cooke one, for example, his brother said this, his manager said this, his friend said this, and it all worked. But it was just too many characters. So you kind of sometimes have to just sort of compress them into one character. So
yeah, I've heard, I can't remember who it was now. I wish I could, but I remember hearing another writer on a panel say that adaptation, or even adapting from true life, is all about compressing and expanding. So it's like compressing the stuff that you don't need into the powerful moments that you do, and then finding the the really, you know, interesting moments and expanding on those and making them.
That's
like,
right.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way I've ever heard it. So
I'll give credit to that writer when I figure out who it
yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just checking to see if we have any other. Phil's asking 5 pages a day after how many days outlining and beat sheeting? So like how long do you spend on each part of the process?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I like to think about the process, the story a lot. I don't like to rush it. I feel like the longer I take with a story and think about it, the better it'll be down the road, and probably I'll save a few drafts that way. So I would like to give myself, 5-6 weeks at least to try to think the story through. Because I want to think it through from every possible angle and just kind of live in it. And then from there, then I'd like, to try to do a first draft, say like a month or so. So probably all told, probably a 2-3 month process for a first draft at least. But that's the part I like the most is the possibility process where you're thinking about it and you're living in that world. Yeah.
So what happens when you say you have a producer that comes to you and they're like, here's the idea, can you write a draft in 4 weeks? Then how do you shorten that process?
I was just going to get to that because when I was thinking about that, because to me, when somebody comes to me with an idea and they just want me to turn it around really quickly, I just want to be like, you don't understand. I'm basically, it's kind of like falling in love, it's not speed dating. So you kind of have to get to know this person and kind of fall in love with them before you can, really start doing anything. So it takes time and it takes a lot of energy out of your day just to think about it without even writing it. So part of that is like, you have to give me time to think about this.
Mm-hmm.
If you want something really good, it's going to take time to really think about, and develop it. So I try to, and lately I have to say no to things because if I feel like it's not an idea I really want to live with, or if I'm not going to learn something from it, then I don't want to do it. And lately, it's like every project I do, I want to learn something from it, So if I don't feel like it's really of any value to me, then I usually just still feel like, I got my plate full. It's my polite way of saying and it usually is, like my plate's full. I just can't do that at this time.
Right.
So.
Okay. I don't want to hijack your whole day, so I'm going to ask you one last thing. I know that Chaco had a question here that I was curious about. What films have influenced your own screenwriting, and what books have influenced your own fiction writing?
Oh, wow. Good question. Because when I saw Jaws at 8 years old, begged my mom to see Jaws at 8 years old, probably gave me PTSD for life. But I had never even thought about making movies. And after I saw that movie, I wanted to make movies, get out the little Brownie camera. And so Jaws is probably the #1 movie that made me start thinking about stories. So that would be, if I had to pick one movie, that would be it. But, of course, I love all kinds of movies, from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf to Ed Wood to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I just love movies. And tell me a story, with a character who's interesting. I don't care what the genre is. I'll fall in love with it. As far as books, the first book that really made an impact with me it was The Shining by Stephen King. I mean, I read that in the 8th grade, and I started writing right after that. And then the Stories of Ray Bradbury was, probably the next writer who, both of those writers probably were the two that are most influential to me. Mm-hmm. And reading their short stories, especially after King's The Shining, I read his Night Shift, his book of short stories, which was the stuff he wrote for magazines, a lot of gentleman magazines. And I started trying to emulate those stories. And Ray Bradbury, I think Golden Apples of the Sun was the first book of short stories I read by him. Something Wicked This Way Comes, his novel, is probably my favorite novel of all time. So yeah, just trying to emulate writers, and probably those two are the most influential.
Excellent. That's a good reading list. I'm going to add those tonight.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Night Shift is fun to still go back to. Those are you know, especially after you've read. I've read probably 2/3 of King's works, and just going back and kind of seeing his early stuff and seeing a lot of his themes that he would later develop into other things. It's kind of really interesting.
Yeah, for me it was Christine and Four Past.
Oh, Christine, love Christine.
Midnight was the other one. Yeah.
Oh, that's the other great one.
Oh my gosh, talk about PTSD. I couldn't go in our garage for.
Is that right? Oh, that's great. Yeah. Sometimes when I'm running on the road at night, I think of Christine like coming up behind me, as I'm running. Makes me run a lot faster.
That's a good trick. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I know a lot of people have posted comments in here, on the Facebook page for you. So everyone's really appreciative. And
I appreciate them being appreciative. It's very cool.
Excellent. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Everyone get back to writing.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.